and welcome to Chapel at a Distance. It's a great pleasure and a great joy for me to be able to share with you from God's Word. Life is a mystery. Life is an enigma. Life is Hevel. If you can remember from our last study together, we were looking at the words of the teacher. He's this interesting character, this interesting figure who is unpacking for us the meaning of life. He is a character in the book of Ecclesiastes who invites us to come on a journey with him as he considers the paradoxes of life, the complexities of life, the seeming meaninglessness of life. In fact, last week we read in verse 1 that his summary in opening up his thoughts is meaningless, utterly meaningless. Everything is meaningless, which is an unfortunate translation because the teacher is not saying that life is meaningless, nor is he promoting self-loathing or depression. What he's saying is that life is beyond grasping. It is profound. It is far beyond anyone's comprehension. In fact, that word translated meaningless, or in other Bibles, vanity, really means vapor or smoke. That's the actual translation of that word. In other words, what the teacher is saying is that, to borrow an illustration, life is like smoke. You can see it's there, but as soon as you try and grasp at it, it just slips through your fingers. It seems to make sense, but as soon as you grasp at it, you don't have a hold in it. Life is complex in that way. It's temporary. It's difficult to understand. It's complex, and it's temporary in the perspective of time, in the perspective of death, in the perspective of what looks like random events that happen in our lives. And it makes what we do seem so empty, and that's what he's getting at by using that word hevel, which our Bibles translate meaningless. Now, of course, that's not the end of the story. Remember, he's inviting us on a journey with him as he considers life, but he's not saying life is meaningless. But he wants us to join on this journey with him to understand what he's getting at. In today's message, we're considering this word hevel, meaningless, in the perspective of time, in the context of time. In other words, consider life, your life, everyone's life who's ever lived in history in the context of time. Listen to what the teacher says. What do people gain from all their labor at which they toil under the sun? That's his question. Generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. The sun rises and the sun sets and hurries back to where it rises. The wind blows to the south and turns to the north. Round and round it goes, ever returning on its course. All streams flow into the sea, yet the sea is never full. To the place where the streams come from, there they return again. All things are wearisome, more than one can say. The eye never has enough of seeing, nor the ear its fill of hearing. What has been will be again. What has been done will be done again. There is nothing new under the sun. Is there anything of which one can say, look, this is something new? It was already here long ago. It was here before our time. No one remembers the former generations, and even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. Ecclesiastes chapter 3, verse 1 to 11. So it seems like a bleak outlook at life. But what is the teacher getting at? Well, consider this. How many of you guys can remember your grandparents? I suspect most of you can, because for some of you, and for some of us, our grandparents are still alive. But how many of you can remember your great-grandparents? Or how about your great-great-grandparents? You see, the further you go back in your own history, the less and less you begin to know about your own family. We know of important people in history because others have written about their lives, but what about the billions of unwritten stories? We will never know about them. At the moment, your life carries meaning, and means something to you because you're alive and because you're here. But will your children's children's children remember you? See, time is a way of putting life into perspective. It shows us how temporary our lives are, how vaporous our lives are, how heavy our lives are. This is what the teacher's getting at. He says generations come, generations go, and yes, guess what? The earth remains forever. That's what it looks like. In other words, the mountain is still standing. It has a name. It has a name long before you come into the world, and it has a name long after you exit the world. It still stands there. The earth continues to follow its circuit around the sun, year in and year out, day after day. The earth is spinning around the sun, and that doesn't change. Whether you live or die, that remains the same. The rivers continue to flow. The rain continues to fall. The wind continues to blow round and round in its circuits. And all the while we toil, and all the while we work and we achieve, but nothing really changes. And that's what he's getting at. Yes, there's technology and advances. Yes, nations rise and nations fall. Yes, there are historical figures. But nothing really changes. Things stay the same. Time marches on, and so does the natural order of things. And this puts life into perspective, is what he's saying. This is what time does. It just eliminates anything that you think this has meaning. An American poet once put it like this. His name was William Carlos Williams. He said, "Time is a storm in which we are all lost." So the question is, well, where does this then leave us? Well, one of the things we must understand is that meaning in life will not be found in the things that are temporary, things that are passing away. Meaning will not be found in a career. Meaning will not be found in wealth or in pleasure, because time is a way of erasing all of those things. Listen to what the teacher says in another part of the book. He says, "I hated all things I had toiled for under the sun." And he says, "Because I must leave them to the one who comes after me. And who knows whether this person will be wise or foolish? Yet he will have control over the fruit of my toil, into which I have poured my effort and skill under the sun." This too is meaningless. That's his exclamation. This too is it just doesn't make sense. Or in another place, he speaks about wealth. And he says this, "Whoever loves money never has enough. Whoever loves wealth is never satisfied." This too is meaningless. As goods increase, so do those who consume them. And what benefit are they to the owners except to feast their eyes on them? The sleep of a laborer is sweet, whether they eat little or much. But as for the rich, their abundance permits them no sleep. In other words, time is a way of erasing things that we work for and for things that we've earned. It turns it up as worthless. And the teacher is saying, and that's what he wants us to understand. And he wants us to understand this so that we can come to a place where we accept that we are not in control of life. We are not in control of our own lives. And that by accepting this, we would relinquish the illusion that we have of control over life. He breaks us down in order to build us up again. You see, at some of the lowest point, even in the teacher's thoughts and his rationale, he begins to mention the gift of God. So he says this, "I know that there is nothing better for people than to be happy and to do good while they live, that each of them may eat and drink and find satisfaction in their toil. This is the gift of God." See, we are not in control of things, but by letting go of that control, we're able to enjoy the simple, everyday things in life. That's what the teacher says. Things like family, things like friends, things like work and food and drink. These things we're able to enjoy as we experience them rather than trying to control them, which we're unable to do. And so life is this mystery, life is this enigma. It doesn't seem to make sense, but God knows the beginning from the end. And by resting in Him, I don't escape the hevel, I don't escape the paradox, I don't escape the life, I don't escape life, but I am content in it. I'm content in it, and I'm able to rest in it because I'm resting in Him, even when I don't understand everything and the profundity of life that's taking place. And that is where the contentment and the joy lies, in what God has gifted to us. Trust you're all keeping healthy and safe. God bless.